Louisiana, 1842. The Atchafalaya Basin stretched for miles like a dark, breathing labyrinth. Cypress trees rose from black water like ancient sentinels. Moss hung from their branches in thick curtains. And somewhere deep in that wilderness, past where even the bravest hunters dared to go, lived a legend. They called her the Ghost Girl. Some said she was a runaway slave who had lost her mind. Others whispered she was a witch who commanded the swamp itself. The Cajun trappers told stories of a black girl who moved through the jungle like smoke, appearing and disappearing without sound or warning. But there was one thing everyone agreed on. White men who went looking for her never came back. Sarah Mitchell stood on the loading dock in New Orleans, her hands raw from scrubbing the ship's deck. She was 16 years old, born enslaved on the Beaumont plantation, sold 3 times before she could read, and now working on a riverboat that carried goods up and down the Mississippi. She had heard the stories about the ghost girl her whole life, whispered around slave quarter fires, spoken in hushed tones by the deckhands, always with fear, always with fascination. But Sarah had never expected to meet the person behind the legend. The trouble started on a humid August morning when the riverboat docked at a small trading post on the edge of the basin. Sarah was hauling cargo when she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. "I'm telling you she's real," a red-faced man in expensive hunting clothes was saying. His name was Clayton Marsh, a plantation owner from Baton Rouge. "My best tracker saw her just last week. A young black girl, maybe 17 or 18, living alone in the deepest part of the swamp." His companion, a thin man with cold eyes named Dr. Vincent Shaw, leaned forward with interest. "Alone? That's impossible. No one could survive out there without supplies, without shelter." "That's what makes it so fascinating," Marsh replied. "She's not just surviving, she's thriving. The locals say she knows the swamp better than anyone, can disappear into the water without a ripple, can call alligators like pets." Dr. Shaw's eyes gleamed. "If we could capture her, study her, think of what we could learn, how the Negro brain adapts to primitive conditions, it would be groundbreaking research." Sarah's stomach turned. She knew that look, that tone. These men didn't see the ghost girl as a person. They saw her as a specimen, an experiment. "There's a problem," Marsh continued. "Every man I've sent after her has vanished. 7 men in the past 2 years, gone without a trace." "Perhaps they simply got lost in the swamp," Dr. Shaw suggested. "That's what I thought at first, but then we found one of them." Marsh's voice dropped lower, or what was left of him, drowned in 3 feet of water, no signs of struggle, like he just walked into the water and didn't walk out. Dr. Shaw was quiet for a moment. "You think she killed him?" "I think she knows how to use that swamp as a weapon," Marsh said. "And I think she's dangerous, which is why I'm offering $1,000 to anyone who can bring her in alive." $1,000. It was more money than most people would see in a lifetime. Sarah watched as men started gathering around Marsh, eager for details, eager for the reward. But all Sarah could think about was the girl in the swamp, the girl who had somehow escaped slavery and survived on her own, the girl who had kept herself free for years while others tried to drag her back into chains. Sarah had to warn her. That night Sarah did something she had never done before. She ran. She slipped off the riverboat while the crew was drunk and distracted. She took only what she could carry, a knife from the kitchen, a blanket, a canteen of water, and she headed into the Atchafalaya Basin. The swamp at night was a different world. The water was black as ink, reflecting nothing. Strange sounds echoed through the trees, splashing, calling, rustling that could have been wind or could have been something else entirely. Sarah had grown up near water, but this was different. This was wild in a way that made her feel small and vulnerable. Every shadow could hide danger. Every sound could be a warning. She walked for hours, following what looked like paths but might have just been gaps between the trees. Her feet sank into mud. Branches caught at her clothes, and all around her the swamp seemed to watch. Then she heard it, singing. A voice, young and clear, drifting through the darkness. It was singing in a language Sarah didn't recognize, not English, not French, something older. The melody was haunting, beautiful, and somehow familiar. Sarah followed the sound deeper into the swamp. The water rose to her knees, then her waist. She had to push through thick vegetation, her hands getting cut on sharp reeds. The singing stopped. Sarah froze, suddenly aware of how alone she was, how far from anything familiar, how completely helpless if something went wrong. "Who are you?" a voice asked from the darkness. Sarah spun around but saw nothing. "My name is Sarah. I came to warn you. There are men coming. They want to capture you." Silence, then a laugh, not cruel but amused. "Men are always coming. Men are always looking. They never find what they're searching for." A figure emerged from the shadows so silently that Sarah gasped. She was young, just as the story said, with skin dark as the swamp water and eyes that seemed to see everything. She wore clothes made from animal skins and plant fibers. Her hair was thick with moss and small flowers woven through it. She looked wild, powerful, free. "You're her," Sarah breathed, "the ghost girl." The girl's expression shifted to something harder. "That's what they call me. My real name is Ayana. It means beautiful flower in my grandmother's language, but white men don't care about names. They only care about labels." "I'm not like them," Sarah said quickly. "I'm enslaved too. I heard them talking about coming after you, about the reward. I thought you should know." Ayana studied her for a long moment. "You ran away from your masters to warn me, a stranger." "I ran away because I'm tired of watching white men take everything from us," Sarah said, surprised by the fierceness in her own voice. "I ran away because maybe, just maybe, I'm tired of being owned." Something flickered in Ayana's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or respect. "You don't know how to survive out here," Ayana said. It wasn't a question. "No," Sarah admitted, "but I'm willing to learn." Ayana was quiet again, considering. Around them the swamp pulsed with life, frogs calling, water moving, night birds crying out. "If you stay, there's no going back," Ayana said finally. "The swamp doesn't forgive weakness, and the men who come looking for us won't stop. They'll keep coming until we're both dead or captured." "Then we make sure they don't find us," Sarah replied. For the first time, Ayana smiled. It transformed her face from something hard and guarded to something young and almost hopeful. "Come," she said, "I'll show you my home, and then I'll teach you how to disappear." Sarah followed Ayana deeper into the swamp, to a place where the water opened up into a hidden lagoon. In the center, built on a platform of woven branches and mud, sat a small shelter. It was ingenious, completely hidden from any angle except straight above, camouflaged with living plants that grew over and through the structure. Inside, it was dry and surprisingly comfortable, with sleeping mats made from soft moss and supplies stored in waterproof pouches. "How long have you been out here?" Sarah asked. 3 years, Ayana replied. "I escaped from the Delacroix plantation when I was 14. They worked my mother to death and sold my little brother downriver. I decided I'd rather die free in this swamp than live one more day in chains." "How did you survive?" Ayana's expression grew distant. "An old woman found me that first night, a freed slave who lived out here, gathering herbs and helping runaways. She taught me the ways of the swamp, how to find food, how to read the water, how to move without being seen. She died 2 years ago, but her knowledge lives on in me." Sarah felt a pang of sadness. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," Ayana said. "She lived free for 40 years, died in her sleep under the stars. That's more than most of our people get." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the swamp. "You said men keep coming," Sarah said eventually. "What happens to them?" Ayana's face became unreadable. The swamp happens to them. I don't kill anyone if that's what you're asking. But I know this place. I know where the water is deep and where it's shallow. I know where the alligators nest and where the quicksand waits. I know how to make someone think they're being chased when they're really being led. Led where? Into the swamp's heart, Ayana said softly. Where the water is dark and the cypress roots grow thick. Where a man can walk in circles for hours thinking he's going forward. Where the fear gets into your mind and makes you see things that aren't there. Sarah shivered despite the warm night. You use their fear against them. I use their arrogance, Ayana corrected. They come into this swamp thinking they own it, thinking they can conquer it the same way they conquered us. But the swamp doesn't belong to anyone, and it doesn't forgive people who treat it with disrespect. The next morning, Ayana began Sarah's education. She showed her which plants were edible and which were poison. She taught her how to catch fish with her bare hands and how to move through water without making sound. She explained the language of the swamp, what different bird calls meant, how to read the movement of the water, when to hide and when to run. Sarah learned quickly. She had always been observant, always watching, always calculating. Those skills that had helped her survive slavery now helped her survive the wilderness. But on the third day, everything changed. They were gathering wild rice when Ayana suddenly went still. Her head tilted, listening to something Sarah couldn't hear. They're here, Ayana whispered, the hunters. Sarah's heart began to pound. How many? At least 5, maybe more. They're coming from the east following the main channel. What do we do? Ayana's expression became cold and focused. We do what we always do. We disappear, and we make sure they regret coming here. She grabbed Sarah's hand and pulled her deeper into the swamp, moving so fast and so silently that Sarah struggled to keep up. They waded through water, climbed over fallen logs, pushed through dense vegetation. Behind them, Sarah could hear voices now, men calling to each other, the sound of boats moving through water. There, someone shouted, I saw movement. Ayana squeezed Sarah's hand once, then let go. Stay here, don't move, don't make a sound. No matter what you hear, stay hidden. What are you going to do? Sarah asked, terrified. Ayana's smile was sharp as a blade. I'm going to teach them why they should fear the ghost girl. And then she was gone, disappearing into the swamp like she had never been there at all. Sarah crouched in the hollow of a massive cypress tree, her heart hammering so hard she thought the hunters might hear it. The voices were getting closer. She could make out individual words now. She's out here somewhere, Clayton Marsh's voice carried across the water. Spread out, search every inch. Remember, we need her alive. Sarah pressed herself deeper into the tree, praying they wouldn't find her, praying Ayana knew what she was doing. Then the screaming started. The scream cut through the swamp like a knife. It was high-pitched, terrified, and unmistakably human. Sarah's whole body went rigid in her hiding place as the sound echoed through the trees, bouncing off the water, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Miller, Clayton Marsh's voice cracked with panic. Miller, where are you? Sarah could hear splashing now. Men thrashing through the water, their previous confidence replaced with chaos. She risked a glance from her hiding spot and saw 4 figures moving frantically through the swamp, their rifles raised, their eyes wide. I'm here, a man's voice, Miller presumably, shouted from somewhere to the left. Something grabbed my leg, something in the water. What did you see? Dr. Shaw demanded, his voice trying to maintain scientific calm but failing. I didn't see nothing. I felt it. Cold hands wrapping around my ankle, pulling me down. I barely got away. Sarah watched as the men converged on Miller, a stocky man with a red face who was now standing waist-deep in dark water, his hands shaking as he clutched his rifle. There's nothing in this water that grabs people, Marsh said, but his voice lacked conviction. You probably caught your foot on a root. Roots don't feel like fingers, Miller shot back. Roots don't pull. A soft sound, almost like laughter, drifted through the air. Sarah's head snapped toward it, but she saw nothing except shadows and Spanish moss swaying in the breeze. Except there was no breeze. "Did you hear that?" one of the other hunters whispered. He was younger, barely 20, with hands that trembled on his weapon. "I didn't hear anything," Marsh insisted, but his eyes were darting around nervously. "There," the young hunter pointed. "Something moved in those trees." All four men spun toward where he was pointing, rifles raised. But there was nothing there, just the endless tangle of cypress and water and shadow. "We should go back," Miller said. "This ain't natural, this whole place ain't natural." "We're not leaving without that girl," Dr. Shaw said firmly. "There's $1,000 waiting for the man who brings her in. Now spread out and search systematically. She's just a scared runaway. She's not a ghost." But even as he said it, Sarah could see the doubt in his eyes. The men separated again, moving deeper into the swamp. Sarah lost sight of them as they spread out, but she could track their progress by sound, boots sucking in mud, water splashing, branches breaking. Then another scream, this one cut off abruptly, replaced by a heavy splash. "Johnson," Marsh shouted. "Johnson, answer me." Silent, long, terrible silence. Sarah watched as the three remaining hunters rushed toward where the sound had come from. They found Johnson floating face down in shallow water, his rifle sunk beside him. Marsh and Miller pulled him out. Johnson was breathing but unconscious, a large knot swelling on his forehead. "What happened?" the young hunter asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "He hit his head," Dr. Shaw said, examining the wound. "Probably slipped and fell." "In 2 feet of water," Miller challenged. "How does a grown man slip and knock himself out in 2 feet of water?" Nobody had an answer for that. "We need to get him back to the boat," Marsh said. "Miller, help me carry him. Shaw, you and Davis keep watch." As they started to move, carrying the unconscious Johnson between them, Sarah saw something that made her breath catch. Ayanna. She was in the water, barely 20 feet from the hunters, but completely invisible. Only Sarah could see her because she knew where to look, and even then, Ayanna was barely more than a ripple on the surface, her dark skin blending with the shadowed water, her body perfectly still except for the slow movement of her breathing. She was watching the men, studying them, and there was something in her eyes that Sarah had never seen before. Not anger, not hatred, something colder and more calculating. She was hunting them. The hunters made it about 50 yards before the young one, Davis, started screaming. "They're everywhere in the trees, in the water, I see them." "See what?" Shaw demanded, grabbing the young man's shoulders. "Faces, dark faces watching us there," Davis pointed wildly. "And there and there." Marsh and Miller looked where he was pointing, but Sarah could see from their expressions that they saw nothing. "It's just shadows," Marsh said, but his voice was uncertain. "The light playing tricks." "That ain't shadows," Davis insisted. His eyes were wild now, rolling like a spooked horse. "They're all around us, can't you see them?" "There's nothing there," Dr. Shaw said firmly. He pulled a small bottle from his coat. "Here, drink this. It's laudanum. It'll calm your nerves." But Davis knocked the bottle away. "I ain't crazy. I know what I'm seeing." He raised his rifle and fired into the trees. The gunshot was deafeningly loud in the quiet swamp. Birds erupted from the branches, screaming. The sound echoed and re-echoed until it seemed like a dozen guns had fired. "You fool," Marsh shouted. "You'll alert every gator in the basin." But it was too late. The damage was done. Davis had revealed just how scared they were, just how close to breaking. Sarah watched as Anna slowly submerged, disappearing beneath the dark water without a ripple. Where was she going? What was she planning? The hunters struggled on, now carrying 2 men, Johnson, who was still unconscious, and Davis, who had to be supported between Marsh and Miller because he couldn't stop shaking and seeing things that weren't there. Dr. Shaw walked behind them, his rifle raised, his head constantly turning to scan the swamp around them. They were maybe 100 yards from their boat when Miller started to lag behind. "Come on," Marsh urged. "We're almost there." "My legs," Miller gasped. "They feel heavy, like something's pulling on them." "It's just the mud." Shaw said, "Keep moving." But Miller's legs were giving out. He collapsed into the water, bringing Davis down with him. "Get up," Marsh commanded. "I can't." Miller's voice was panicked now. "Something's wrong. I can't feel my legs." Dr. Shaw waded over and examined Miller's legs, pulling them from the water. His face went pale. "Leeches," he said quietly. "Dozens of them." Sarah's stomach turned as she saw Miller's legs covered in thick black leeches, swollen with blood. They were everywhere on his calves, his thighs, even around his ankles. "Get them off," Miller screamed. "Get them off me." Shaw and Marsh worked frantically, pulling the leeches off one by one. But for every one they removed, another seemed to appear. And Miller was weakening, losing blood, his face going from red to pale gray. "We have to move," Marsh said. "Now carry him." They stumbled forward, 3 conscious men now carrying 2 unconscious ones, and supporting a third who was seeing ghosts. They looked nothing like the confident hunters who had entered the swamp just hours earlier. They looked like prey. Sarah heard a sound behind her and spun to find Anna crouched beside her in the hollow of the tree. She had appeared without making a single sound. "You're terrifying," Sarah whispered. Anna's expression was grim. "I'm surviving, there's a difference." "Those leeches, did you?" "I led them through a breeding pool," Anna said simply. "The leeches did the rest. I don't hurt people directly, Sarah. I just show them what the swamp can do. What happens when you enter a place with disrespect and violence in your heart." "And the hallucinations, Davis seeing faces." Anna held up a small pouch, powder from the fire lily. "When burned, it creates smoke that causes visions. I learned it from the old woman. It's harmless but effective." Sarah stared at her. "You're not just surviving out here, you're thriving. You've turned this swamp into a fortress." "I've learned to work with it instead of against it," Anna corrected. "The white men come here thinking they can dominate nature the same way they dominate people, but nature doesn't submit, and neither do I." They watched as the hunters finally reached their boat. It was a large flatboat with supplies and equipment. Marsh and Shaw loaded the injured and shaken men aboard, their hands trembling. "We have to go," Miller said weakly. "We have to get out of here." "We're not leaving without the girl," Dr. Shaw insisted, but his voice lacked conviction now. "Look at us," Marsh shouted. 2 men unconscious, one seeing things that aren't there, another covered in leeches. "We're lucky to be alive." "It's just a swamp," Shaw said desperately. "Just water and trees and animals. There's a scientific explanation for everything that happened." "Then you stay and find it," Marsh shot back. "I'm taking my men and leaving." They started the boat's small engine, the sound harsh and mechanical in the natural quiet. Sarah watched as they began to move away from the shore, heading back toward civilization. But Anna wasn't done with them yet. She stood, revealing herself for the first time, standing on a fallen log in full view of the retreating boat. The men saw her immediately. Marsh pointed, shouting something Sarah couldn't hear over the engine. Anna didn't run, didn't hide. She simply stood there, her dark silhouette stark against the green swamp, and stared at them with an expression of absolute fearlessness. Dr. Shaw grabbed a rifle. Sarah's heart lurched. Was he going to shoot? But Marsh knocked the rifle away. "No, we're leaving." Shaw struggled, trying to raise the weapon again. "She's right there. We can end this now." "I said no," Marsh shouted. He physically wrestled the rifle away from Shaw. "Look at her, she's not afraid of us. This is her domain and she's proven it. We leave now or we don't leave at all." The boat turned away, moving faster now, the engine straining as Marsh pushed it to full speed. Within minutes, they were gone, swallowed by the twisting channels of the Atchafalaya Basin. Ayanna watched until they disappeared, then turned to Sarah with a small, satisfied smile. "They'll be back," Sarah said. "I know," Ayanna replied. "They always come back, but each time they do they're a little more afraid, a little less certain, and eventually the fear wins. Eventually they stop coming." Sarah climbed down from her hiding place. "How many times have you done this?" 7 times in 3 years, Ayanna said. 7 groups of hunters. 7 groups that left with fewer men than they came with, carrying stories of the ghost girl who commands the swamp. "But you didn't kill anyone." "I didn't have to," Ayanna said. "The swamp did the work. I just guided things along, made sure they encountered the most dangerous parts at the most dangerous times, made sure they felt hunted instead of being the hunters." They walked back toward Ayanna's hidden shelter. Sarah's mind was reeling. She had watched Ayanna take apart a group of armed, experienced hunters without ever directly confronting them, without violence, just knowledge, strategy, and an intimate understanding of the environment. "Teach me," Sarah said suddenly. Ayanna looked at her questioningly. "Teach me everything," Sarah continued. "How to read the swamp, how to disappear, how to make hunters into prey. I want to learn all of it." "Why?" Ayanna asked. Sarah thought about the riverboat, about being sold 3 times before she could read, about watching other enslaved people broken by the system, about the casual cruelty of men like Clayton Marsh and Dr. Shaw who saw her people as specimens to study, property to own, problems to solve. "Because I'm tired of running," she said finally. "I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of being afraid. You've shown me there's another way, a way to survive without submitting, to be free without constant flight." Ayanna studied her for a long moment, then she nodded. "It won't be easy," she warned. "The swamp will test you. It will push you to your limits. You'll face fear, pain, exhaustion. You might die out here." "I'll die eventually anyway," Sarah replied. "At least this way I'll die free, die knowing I fought back." Ayanna's smile was fierce and proud. "Then let's begin. The swamp has lessons to teach, and you have much to learn." Over the following weeks, Sarah's education intensified. Ayanna taught her the secrets of the Atchafalaya Basin, secrets passed down from the old woman, secrets learned through 3 years of careful observation. She learned which paths through the water were safe and which led to quicksand. She learned the sounds alligators made when they were hunting and when they were just sunning themselves. She learned how to identify poisonous snakes by the shape of their heads and the pattern of their scales. But more than that, she learned strategy. "The swamp is your ally," Ayanna explained one evening as they ate a dinner of fish and wild greens. "But only if you respect it, only if you learn its rhythms and patterns. White men come here thinking they can conquer it through force, but force means nothing to a place like this." "So what does mean something?" Sarah asked. "Understanding, patience, the willingness to become part of the environment rather than trying to dominate it." Sarah thought about that as she fell asleep that night on her moss bed, the sounds of the swamp all around her. For the first time in her life, she wasn't defined by her relationship to white people. She wasn't a slave, a servant, a piece of property. She was simply herself, learning to survive in a place where human hierarchies meant nothing. It was the most freedom she had ever known. But their peace was not to last. 3 weeks after the first hunters left, new ones arrived. The new hunter was different from the others. Sarah spotted him first, while she was checking fish traps near the eastern edge of the basin. She saw a lone figure moving through the swamp with the quiet confidence of someone who actually knew what they were doing. He was a white man, maybe 40 years old, with sun-weathered skin and careful eyes. He moved slowly, deliberately, reading the water and the trees the way Ayanna had taught Sarah to do. He wasn't crashing through the undergrowth like the previous hunters. He was listening. Sarah slipped back into the water and made her way to Ayanna's shelter, moving fast but silent. There's a new one, she reported, but he's different, he knows the swamp. Ayana's expression darkened. Show me. They moved together through the familiar paths, staying low and hidden. When they finally spotted the hunter, Ayana went very still. I know him, she whispered. Who is he? His name is James Bridger. He's a tracker, a real one. He spent 20 years hunting in the Western Territories before coming back to Louisiana. I've heard stories about him. They say he can track anything, that he never gives up once he's on a trail. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Can you lose him, like the others? Ayana was quiet, studying Bridger as he examined a broken branch, then moved carefully in the direction it pointed. I don't know. The others were arrogant, impatient. They made mistakes. This one, he's different. Over the next 3 days, they watched Bridger work. He wasn't hunting them directly. He was learning the swamp. He set up a small, efficient camp on high ground. He caught fish and set snares for small game. He mapped the channels and tested the water depth. He was preparing, planning, getting ready for a long stay. What's he waiting for? Sarah asked on the 4th day. For us to make a mistake, Ayana replied. The others tried to hunt us actively. Bridger is being patient. He knows we're out here. He's waiting for us to reveal ourselves. Then we don't, Sarah said. We stay hidden. For how long? He has supplies. He can stay out here for weeks, maybe months. And every day he's here, he learns more, gets closer. Sarah saw the worry in Ayana's eyes. For the first time since they'd met, Ayana looked uncertain. We could leave, Sarah suggested. Go deeper into the swamp, find a new place. And then what? Wait for the next hunter, and the one after that? Ayana shook her head. No, this is my home. I won't be driven from it. That night, Ayana made a decision. I'm going to talk to him. Sarah's eyes went wide. What? That's insane. He'll capture you. Maybe, or maybe I can convince him to leave. The others were driven by greed and scientific curiosity. But Bridger, he's a tracker. This is just a job to him. Maybe he can be reasoned with. And if he can't? Ayana's jaw set in determination. Then I'll deal with that too. Sarah wanted to argue, to convince Ayana this was too dangerous. But she saw the resolve in her friend's eyes and knew there was no changing her mind. Then I'm coming with you, Sarah said firmly. They approached Bridger's camp at dawn, when the swamp was shrouded in mist and the light was gray and uncertain. Ayana led the way, making no attempt to hide their approach. Bridger was awake, boiling coffee over a small fire. He looked up as they emerged from the mist, and to his credit, he didn't reach for his rifle. He simply watched them approach with calm, assessing eyes. The ghost girl, he said quietly, and a friend. I wondered when you'd come. You're trespassing, Ayana said, her voice steady. This is my home. Bridger poured himself a cup of coffee. Technically, this is state land. Specifically, it's the Atchafalaya Basin, owned by the state of Louisiana. You're as much a trespasser as I am. I've lived here for 3 years. I've hurt no one. I've broken no laws except the unjust ones that say I'm property. Unjust or not, there's still the law, Bridger replied. He gestured to the log across from him. Sit, talk with me. I mean you no harm, at least not right now. Ayana and Sarah exchanged glances. Then slowly they sat. Why are you here? Ayana asked. I was hired to find you. Clayton Marsh offered $1,000. And you need the money. Bridger smiled slightly. I always need money, but that's not really why I came. Then why? Because 7 groups of hunters have entered this swamp looking for you. 7 groups have left carrying injured men and terrified stories. That interested me. Made me wonder what kind of person could defend territory this effectively without weapons, without violence. He studied Ayana with genuine curiosity. You've turned this swamp into a fortress. You've used the environment itself as a weapon. That's impressive, clever. I wanted to see for myself. So this is about your professional pride, Sarah said bitterly. You want to prove you're better than the others." "Partially," Bridger admitted, "but it's more than that. I spent 20 years in the West tracking outlaws and fugitives, and you know what I learned? The ones who survive longest aren't the fastest or the strongest. They're the ones who understand the land, who work with it instead of against it." He looked at Anna. "You understand this swamp better than anyone I've ever met, white or black, free or enslaved. You've achieved something remarkable out here." "And yet you're still planning to take me back in chains," Anna said. Bridger was quiet for a long moment. "I haven't decided yet." Sarah blinked in surprise. "What?" "I said I was hired to find you, and I have, but Marsh didn't specify when I had to bring you in, or even if I had to." Anna leaned forward. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I've seen a lot of injustice in my life. I've tracked runaway slaves before, and it never sat right with me. The law says you're property, but the law has been wrong before. Is wrong now, if you ask my personal opinion." He set down his coffee cup. "So here's what I'm proposing. You let me stay here, teach me the swamp the way you know it. In exchange, I'll tell Marsh I searched for weeks and found nothing. The ghost girl is just a legend, nothing more." "You'd lie for us?" Sarah asked skeptically. "I'd lie for $1,000 I can earn elsewhere," Bridger corrected. "Marsh isn't the only person who needs a tracker, and honestly, I've always wanted to really learn a swamp like this one. You could teach me things I'd never learn on my own." Anna studied him for a long time. Sarah could see her weighing the options, calculating the risks. "How do we know we can trust you?" Anna asked finally. Bridger spread his hands. "You don't. Trust has to be earned. All I can offer is my word. And my word is this: I won't betray you to Marsh or anyone else. I'll stay for 2 weeks, learn what I can, and then leave. If at any point you want me gone sooner, say the word and I'll go." It was a risk, a huge one, but Sarah could see something in Bridger's eyes that she hadn't seen in the other hunters. Respect. Not for what Anna represented as a curiosity or specimen, but for what she had achieved. "1 week," Anna said finally. "You stay for 1 week. I'll teach you what I can. But you sleep in your own camp, you respect our boundaries, and if I sense for one moment that you're lying, you'll find out exactly what happened to those other hunters." Bridger smiled. Fair enough. Over the next week, an unexpected partnership formed. Bridger proved to be a quick study and a respectful guest. He asked questions but didn't pry. He observed but didn't judge. Anna taught him to read the subtle signs of the swamp, how to tell if water was safe to drink, how to identify animal trails, how to move silently through water. In exchange, Bridger shared knowledge from his years in the West, tracking techniques, survival skills, ways to preserve food. Sarah watched the interactions carefully, still not entirely trusting. But she had to admit, Bridger kept his word. He maintained his distance, respected their space, and never once tried to trick or trap them. On the 5th night, they sat around Bridger's fire, sharing a meal of fish and wild rice. "Can I ask you something?" Bridger said to Anna. "You can ask, I might not answer." "The other hunters, the ones who didn't come back, what really happened to them?" Anna was quiet, staring into the fire. "I told you, the swamp happened to them." "But you guided it, directed it." "I showed them the consequences of disrespect," Anna said carefully. "I led them to places where the swamp reveals its true nature: dark water, gator nests, quicksand. I didn't hurt them directly. I just stopped protecting them from what was already there." "And the hallucinations?" Anna pulled out her pouch of fire lily powder. "This, burned in small amounts, it causes visions. Harmless but effective. Men who come here expecting to dominate often can't handle what happens when that control slips away." Bridger nodded slowly. "You've weaponized fear and knowledge. That's more effective than any rifle." "Because rifles run out of bullets," Anna said. "Knowledge doesn't." "What will you do when they send someone you can't scare away?" Bridger asked. Someone who doesn't care about fear or consequences. The question hung in the air like smoke. I don't know, Yana admitted quietly. Hope it doesn't come to that. It will, Bridger said, not unkindly but matter-of-factly. Men like Clayton Marsh don't give up. They'll keep sending hunters, and eventually they'll send someone who'll burn this whole swamp down if that's what it takes. Sarah felt cold despite the fire's warmth, because she knew he was right. Then what should we do? Sarah asked. Bridger looked at them both. Run, go north, Canada. There are roots, people who help. You could actually be free instead of just hiding. I won't run anymore, Anna said firmly. This is my home, I've earned it. I won't let them take it from me. Sometimes survival means letting go, Bridger said gently. And sometimes it means standing your ground, Anna countered. They sat in silence, the fire crackling, the swamp singing its night song around them. On the 7th day, Bridger prepared to leave. He packed his camp efficiently, erasing most evidence he'd been there. Thank you, he said to Anna, for trusting me, for teaching me. I learned more in a week with you than I did in 20 years on my own. Will you keep your word, Anna asked, about not telling Marsh? I'll keep my word, Bridger confirmed. As far as anyone knows, the ghost girl doesn't exist, just stories and shadows. He mounted his horse, then paused. But Anna, be careful. The world is changing. Slavery is being questioned more and more. There's going to be a reckoning, and when it comes, you'll need allies, people who know what you've accomplished out here. I have Sarah, Anna said, reaching for her friend's hand. And you have me, Bridger added. If you ever need help, real help, send word to the trading post at Bayou Sorrel. I'll come. He rode away, disappearing into the swamp the way he'd come. Silent, respectful, leaving barely a trace. Sarah and Anna stood watching until he was gone. Do you think he meant it? Sarah asked. About helping if we need him. I think so, Anna said. He's a rare kind of white man, one who actually listens. But he's right about the rest, isn't he? Eventually someone will come who we can't handle. Anna's hand tightened on Sarah's. Then we'll be ready together. But as they walked back to their shelter, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Bridger had seen something they hadn't. Some future danger approaching like a storm on the horizon. She was right to worry. Because 2 weeks later, the worst hunter of all arrived. His name was Colonel Muckas Davura, and he came with an army. Not a real army, but close enough. 20 men, armed with rifles and hunting dogs, equipped with supplies for a month-long campaign. They arrived in 3 large boats, making no attempt at stealth or subtlety. Sarah and Anna watched from their hidden vantage point, as the men set up a base camp on the largest patch of dry land in the eastern basin. This is different, Sarah whispered. Anna's face was grim. He's not hunting us, he's laying siege. Colonel Davura was a tall man with silver hair and cold, calculating eyes. He had served in the military for 30 years before retiring to run a plantation. He was used to campaigns, strategy, and overwhelming force. They watched as he organized his men with military precision. He divided them into teams, assigned territories, established patrol routes. He had maps, real maps of the basin. He marked off sections methodically, planning to search every inch. We can't fight this many, Sarah said. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. I know. The tricks that worked on the others, the fear, the misdirection, he'll see through them. He's trained for this. I know, Anna repeated. But for the first time, Sarah heard fear in her friend's voice. Over the next few days, they watched Davura's operation unfold. He was systematic, thorough, and patient. His men moved in coordinated sweeps, covering ground efficiently. The dogs were well trained, not easily spooked. Anna tried her usual tactics. She led one patrol into a gator nest, but the men were prepared, killing the gator before it could attack. She used the fire lily powder, But Davara had instructed his men to tie wet cloth over their faces, filtering out the smoke. He had studied the stories. He knew what to expect. "We need to leave," Sarah said on the fourth night. They were huddled in their shelter, listening to the sounds of men and dogs in the distance. "Anna, please, this isn't like before. We can't win this." "If we run, they'll follow," Anna said. "Dvara won't stop. You heard him this morning. He told his men this is about more than capturing runaways. He called it restoring order, making an example." Sarah had heard. She'd been close enough to the base camp to catch Navara's speech to his men. "This ghost girl has embarrassed 7 groups of hunters," he'd said. "She's made white men look like fools. She's given other slaves ideas about rebellion, about resistance. We end this now. We show everyone what happens when property forgets its place." It wasn't just about capturing them anymore. It was about breaking the symbol they represented. "Then we fight," Sarah said, surprised by her own words. Aina looked at her. "What? You said you won't run. Fine. Then we fight, but smart, the way you taught me. We make this swamp into a nightmare they can't escape." Something sparked in Aina's eyes. Hope, maybe, or determination. "Tell me what you're thinking," she said. Sarah had been watching, learning, calculating, and she had a plan. Dvara is organized, disciplined. He's using military tactics, but military tactics depend on communication, coordination, supply lines. If we disrupt those, we turn his strength into a weakness, Aina finished. A slow smile spread across her face. "You're learning." Over the next 3 nights, they launched a campaign of their own. Not direct confrontation, but careful sabotage. They found the supply boats and punctured small holes in the hulls, not big enough to sink them immediately, but enough that they slowly took on water. By morning, half the food supplies were ruined. They located the rope lines the men used to mark their territories and moved them during the night. Teams ended up searching areas twice while leaving other sections completely unchecked. They mixed harmless but foul-smelling plants into the water supply. No one got sick, but no one wanted to drink either. And they used the swamp itself. They identified the paths Dvara's patrols took and made them dangerous. Hidden logs just below the water surface, disturbed hornets' nests, loosened cypress knees that would turn ankles. It was working. The men were becoming frustrated, tired, paranoid. 2 of them quit after a week, claiming the swamp was cursed. Another broke his leg falling through a rotten log that Aina had carefully weakened. But Dvara didn't quit. If anything, he became more determined. "He knows it's us," Sarah reported after listening to another of his speeches. "He's telling the men that every obstacle is proof we're close, that we're desperate." "Is he wrong?" Aina asked quietly. Sarah didn't answer, because they were desperate. They were running out of options, supplies, energy, and winter was coming. The swamp would get cold, the water would rise, and survival would become even harder. On the 15th day, Dvara changed tactics. Sarah and Aina watched in horror as his men started setting fires. "He's burning the swamp," Sarah breathed. "He's actually burning it." The fires were small, controlled, but strategic. Dvara was burning the areas where Aina and Sarah might hide. He was destroying the thick vegetation that provided cover. "This is our home," Aina said, her voice breaking. "He's destroying our home." Sarah grabbed her friend's hand. "Then we end this, tonight." "How?" Sarah's jaw set in determination. "We take the fight to him, directly. No more hiding, no more tricks. We show him exactly who he's dealing with." It was the most dangerous plan Sarah had ever conceived, possibly suicidal, but she was tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of watching everything Aina had built being systematically destroyed. That night, while Dvara's men slept, Sarah and Aina moved through the camp like ghosts. They disabled rifles, cutting firing pins so they wouldn't work. They released the horses, sending them running into the swamp. They took the boat's oars and hid them in the deep water. And then, as dawn broke, they appeared at the edge of the camp. Devereux was awake as always. He saw them immediately and smiled, a cold, triumphant smile. "Finally," he said, "I was beginning to think you'd never show yourselves." "We're showing ourselves now," Anna said, her voice ringing clear across the water. "And we're giving you one chance to leave. Pack your men and go. Tell them you couldn't find us. Tell them the swamp won." Devereux laughed. "You're in no position to make demands, girl." "Are you sure about that?" Sarah asked. She gestured behind him. Devereux turned, and his expression changed. His camp was in chaos. Men were discovering that their rifles didn't work, that the horses were gone, that the boats were useless, and standing around the perimeter of the camp, emerging from the morning mist, were people. Dozens of them. Runaway slaves who had found safety in the deep swamp, free black families who lived on the basin's edges, Cajun trappers who had no love for plantation owners, even a few white abolitionists who had traveled from the north. They had come at Hannah's call. Word had spread through the underground network. The ghost girl needed help, and they had answered. "What is this?" Devereux demanded. "This is what happens when you push too far," Anna said. "When you try to destroy instead of just capture. You've burned our home, terrorized our sanctuary, and now everyone who has ever benefited from this swamp, everyone who has ever found freedom here, is standing together to say, enough." The people advanced slowly. They weren't armed with rifles or violence. They were simply present, witnesses, a community standing together. Devereux looked around at his disabled rifles, his scattered horses, his ruined boats. He looked at the numbers arrayed against him, and for the first time Sarah saw uncertainty in his eyes. "You can't win," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Neither can you," Anna replied. "Not here, not in our home. You can kill us maybe, but we'll make it costly, and win or lose the story will spread. The story of how the ghost girl and her people stood against Colonel Marcus Devereux and his army, how they refused to submit, how they fought back." She stepped closer. "And that story, that symbol, will inspire others, more runaways, more resistance. Is that really what you want your legacy to be?" The silence stretched out. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the tension like a physical thing. Then Devereux did something unexpected. He laughed, not his earlier triumphant laugh, but something bitter and resigned. "Clever girl," he said, "you've outmaneuvered me, not with violence but with community, with strategy." He looked at his men, at the surrounding crowd, at the ruined camp. "I can't win this, not without massacring dozens of people and becoming the villain in a story that would haunt me forever." He turned back to Anna. "You've won this time, but don't think this is over. There will be others. There will always be others." "Let them come," Anna said quietly. "We'll be here, and we'll keep fighting, keep surviving, keep reminding the world that we're human beings with dignity and worth." Devereux gathered his men. It took most of the day to organize a retreat with damaged equipment and no boats. They had to walk out, carrying their supplies, looking nothing like the confident army that had arrived. As the last of them disappeared into the distance, the crowd around Sarah and Anna erupted in celebration. People were crying, laughing, embracing. But Sarah noticed something. Anna wasn't celebrating. She was staring at the burned sections of swamp, at the damage that had been done. "We won," Sarah said, touching her friend's shoulder. "Did we?" Anna asked. "Look around, Sarah. The swamp is scarred, our hiding places are exposed, and Devereux was right, there will be others, more hunters, more armies. We can't fight them all forever." Sarah felt the truth of those words settle in her chest like a weight. Their victory was real, but it was temporary. The war was far from over. The celebration lasted 3 days. The community that had gathered to defend Anna and Sarah stayed to help rebuild. They repaired the damage from Devereux's fires, replanted vegetation, restored hiding places. They shared food, stories, and a sense of hope that had been rare in all their lives. But on the fourth day, as the last of the helpers departed back to their own hidden lives, reality set in. Sarah and Anna sat on a fallen log overlooking the water, watching the sun set over the scarred landscape. "It's not sustainable," Anna said quietly. "What we're doing here, living in hiding, fighting off hunters, barely surviving, this isn't freedom, it's just a different kind of prison." Sarah wanted to argue, but she couldn't, because Anna was right. For 3 years, Anna had survived in the swamp, and for 6 months, Sarah had joined her. They had fought off hunters, protected their territory, and become legends in the process. But they were still fugitives, still hunted, still defined by the system they were trying to escape. "What are you saying?" Sarah asked, though she thought she knew. "I'm saying maybe it's time to stop hiding, to stop fighting defensively and start fighting for something bigger." "Like what?" Anna turned to look at her friend. "Like actually ending this, not just for us but for everyone." Over the next few weeks, a plan took shape. It was dangerous, possibly insane, but it was also the only path forward that didn't end with them eventually being caught or killed. They would go public. Not as the ghost girl and her mysterious companion, but as real people with real stories. They would travel north, speaking to abolitionist groups, telling the truth about what they had experienced and survived. They would become voices, loud, undeniable voices in the growing movement against slavery. "It means leaving the swamp," Anna said, "leaving our home." "Our home will still be here," Sarah replied, "and others will need it, other runaways seeking sanctuary. We can leave instructions, maps, knowledge. The swamp can still be a refuge even if we're not in it." They spent a month preparing. They created detailed maps of the Atchafalaya Basin, marking safe paths, dangerous areas, hiding places, and water sources. They wrote down everything they knew about surviving in the swamp, what plants were edible, how to avoid predators, where to find shelter. They sealed these documents in waterproof containers and hid them in strategic locations, places where desperate runaways might find them. Each cache included a note. "You are not alone. This swamp has protected others before you. It will protect you too. Learn its rhythms, respect its power. And when you are ready, pass this knowledge on. Freedom is not just escaping, it's helping others escape too." When they finally left the swamp, it was at dawn on a cool October morning. Sarah looked back at the place that had been her home, her school, her fortress for 6 months. "We'll come back," Anna said, reading her thoughts. "When it's safe, when things change, we'll come back." But first, they had work to do. Their first stop was Bayou Sorrel, where they found James Bridger exactly where he said he'd be. He looked surprised to see them, then concerned. "What happened?" he asked. They told him about Devereux, about the siege, about their decision to go public. Bridger listened carefully, then nodded. "I have contacts in the north, abolitionist groups who would be very interested in your story, but it's dangerous. You'll be making yourselves targets." "We're already targets," Sarah pointed out. "At least this way we're targets with a purpose." Bridger arranged everything. Within 2 weeks, Sarah and Anna were on a train heading north, traveling with forged papers that identified them as freed slaves working for an abolitionist newspaper. Their first speaking engagement was in Boston, at a small church hall packed with abolitionists, journalists, and curious onlookers. Sarah stood at the podium, her hands shaking, looking out at a sea of mostly white faces. "My name is Sarah Mitchell," she began. 6 months ago, I was enslaved on a riverboat in Louisiana. I served white passengers, scrubbed decks, and kept my head down because that was how I survived." She paused, gathering her courage. "But then I heard about a girl living in the swamp, a girl who had escaped slavery and created a life of freedom, a girl they called the Ghost Girl because she was impossible to catch." Anna stood from her seat in the front row. The audience gasped. They had heard the legends, but seeing the ghost girl in person was something else entirely. "I'm Anna," she said, joining Sarah at the podium, "and I want to tell you what freedom really costs." They spoke for 2 hours. They told the truth about slavery, not the sanitized version comfortable people in the North preferred to believe, but the raw, brutal reality. They talked about families torn apart, about bodies broken by endless labor, about the daily dehumanization that was designed to destroy the spirit. But they also talked about resistance, about courage, about the networks of people, black and white, slave and free, who helped each other survive and escape. "The swamp taught me that survival isn't about being the strongest or the fastest," Anna said. "It's about understanding the environment, working with it instead of against it, and that lesson applies to more than just nature." Sarah continued the thought. "The system of slavery is an environment too, a hostile one built to oppress us, but just like the swamp. It has weaknesses, contradictions, places where resistance is possible." The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. "We're told that enslaved people are passive victims waiting for white saviors to free us," Anna said. "But that's a lie. We're fighting every day, in small ways and large, and we don't need saviors, we need allies. People willing to stand with us, support us, amplify our voices." When they finished, the room erupted in applause. People stood, some crying, others shouting encouragement. A journalist from the Boston Liberator pushed forward. "Can I publish your story? Get it into newspapers across the North." "That's why we're here," Sarah replied. Over the next 6 months, Sarah and Anna became voices of the abolitionist movement. They traveled to Philadelphia, New York, Syracuse, even as far as Canada. Everywhere they went, crowds gathered to hear the ghost girl and her companion speak. Their story was published in newspapers and pamphlets. Artists created illustrations, somewhat romanticized but capturing the essential truth. The image of Anna standing fearlessly in the swamp, refusing to submit, became a symbol of resistance. But fame brought danger. Slave catchers tracked them from city to city. They received threats. Someone tried to kidnap Anna after a lecture in Philadelphia, but Bridger, who had appointed himself their unofficial bodyguard, stopped it. "You're making powerful enemies," he warned. "People who profit from slavery, they want you silenced." "Let them try," Anna said. "Every attempt just proves our point, shows the violence inherent in the system." The turning point came in 1843, when they were invited to speak before a congressional committee. It was unprecedented, enslaved women testifying before Congress, but the abolitionist movement had gained enough power to make it happen. Sarah stood before the committee of mostly hostile white men and told her story. She didn't soften it, didn't make it palatable. She told the truth about being sold 3 times before she could read, about watching other enslaved people work to death, about the constant fear and dehumanization. Then Anna spoke about the swamp, about creating a life of freedom against impossible odds, about outsmarting 7 groups of hunters without ever using violence. "The question before this committee," Anna said, "is not whether enslaved people are capable of freedom. We've proven we are. The question is whether you have the courage to acknowledge that truth and act on it." The testimony was published in newspapers across the country. It sparked debates in Congress, in churches, in homes. It didn't immediately end slavery. That would take 2 more decades and a brutal civil war. But it planted seeds, changed minds, made the abstract reality of slavery concrete and undeniable. Years passed. Sarah and Anna continued their work, traveling, speaking, writing. They helped coordinate the Underground Railroad, using their knowledge of swamps and wilderness to create safe routes for escaping slaves. They returned to the Atchafalaya Basin several times, always in secret, to check on the caches of information they'd left. They found evidence that others had used them, supplies moved, notes added, new hiding places marked. The swamp was still protecting people, still offering sanctuary. In 1865, when the Civil War finally ended and slavery was abolished, Sarah and Ayanna were in Washington, D.C. They stood in a crowd outside the Capitol, listening to the announcement, and for the first time in their lives, they were legally free. Ayanna turned to Sarah, tears streaming down her face. "We did it. Not just us, but everyone who fought, who resisted, who refused to give up." "What do we do now?" Sarah asked. Ayanna smiled. "We live, actually live, not just survive. We build something real." They returned to Louisiana, not to the swamp this time, but to New Orleans. Using money they'd earned from their lectures and publications, they bought a small building and opened a school. The Atchafalaya Freedom School, they called it. It was for formerly enslaved children and adults, teaching them to read, write, and calculate. But it also taught the lessons Ayanna had learned in the swamp: how to observe, how to adapt, how to turn environments to your advantage. "Education is freedom," Sarah told her students. "Knowledge is power. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." James Bridger visited sometimes, bringing supplies and protection when former Confederates tried to shut the school down. He was an old man now, but still sharp, still keeping his word to help when needed. Dr. Samuel Morton's successor at the Academy of Natural Sciences formally retracted Morton's racist theories, citing new research, including studies of Ayanna's remarkable mathematical and strategic abilities, as evidence that intelligence had no correlation with race. Even Colonel Devereux eventually acknowledged defeat. In his memoirs, published years later, he wrote about his failed campaign in the Atchafalaya Basin. He called Ayanna the most formidable opponent I ever faced, and admitted that the experience had changed his views on slavery. It wasn't an apology, it wasn't enough, but it was something. Sarah and Ayanna ran the Freedom School for 30 years. They taught thousands of students. They created a community of educated, empowered people who went on to become teachers, leaders, activists in their own right. They never forgot the swamp. Every year on the anniversary of their first meeting, they would travel back to the Atchafalaya Basin. They would stand at the edge of the dark water, remembering what they had survived, what they had built. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked on one of these trips when they were both old and gray, leaving the swamp, going public instead of staying hidden. Ayanna was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the cypress trees and black water that had once been her whole world. "I regret what it cost," she said finally. "The danger, the threats, the years of struggle, but I don't regret the choice, because we didn't just save ourselves. We helped save others. And that's what freedom is really about, not just escaping for yourself, but creating paths for others to follow." Sarah took her friend's hand, the ghost girl who lived in the jungle. "The woman who refused to disappear," Ayanna corrected with a smile. They stood together as the sun set over the swamp, two old women who had once been hunted fugitives and had become legends, who had turned fear into courage, hiding into resistance, and personal freedom into collective liberation. The swamp still stood behind them, dark and mysterious and unconquerable, still protecting those who needed sanctuary, still teaching its lessons to anyone brave enough to learn. And somewhere in the deepest part of the Atchafalaya Basin, hidden in a waterproof container, a message waited for the next person who would need it. "You are not alone. This swamp has protected others before you. Learn its rhythms, respect its power, and when you are ready, pass this knowledge on. Freedom is not just escaping, it's helping others escape too." The legacy of the ghost girl would live on, not as a myth or a legend, but as a truth that could never be silenced. Some voices once raised echo forever.